So while we're waiting for the last little busload of folks to come make it over, questions, because we had our case planning session earlier today, then we went straight into the phases session with Carolyn. So questions about that, thoughts about that.
Do family treatment courts do risk needs assessments like adult criminal?
Some do. And if you are in a jurisdiction that has a lot of the concurrent criminal cases, it's not a bad idea. And you could even have folks in your family treatment court who don't have a concurrent criminal case, who just have managed to not get caught, but have some not insignificant criminogenic kinds of thinking and needs. And so it's not a bad idea to know what those things are. And there's some really nice curricula out there that you can integrate into your programming for those folks. And if you're in a jurisdiction that has an adult drug court, I don't know if you want your folks, if they're not already in that system, I don't know, maybe you want them in the same group doing Thinking for a Change, maybe you don't. There are pros and cons.
So I've been collecting suggestions for, really easy to use, very helpful criminogenic risk assessments.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any suggestions?
Oh, it's been a little while since I worked in the criminal system. I mean, a lot of states have just those that are mandated. More often than not, it's, they've got the LSIR or something like that that's just mandated by the state that everybody uses.
Right, and so I asked our POs and they said, well, our state system, our assessment sucks, don't use it.
Oh, okay.
Not on me.
No, I thought you were going to offer a suggestion.
No, I have another question.
And they said,
okay. Other folks, what are you using any kind of criminogenic assessment? What are you using? Anybody?
So we haven't implemented anything like that yet, but we were talking about this at lunch today, about implementing something into our screening, and it's something we're going to talk more about, and it's called the irons.
irons, yeah.
And
Okay.
because I just feel like
Come on in. We're
When
just
I-
talking
Where
about
are the
questions.
restrooms?
Oh, through that way?
Okay, thanks.
I just feel like that sometimes we're bringing on folks that aren't high risk, high need, and we're just pulling them in, and it kind of, in the long run, some of them end up leaving, some of them end up quitting, some of them end up getting exited, and so I just want to make sure we're getting the subjective stuff, the subjective data, so we can figure out whether or not they're going to qualify for our court or not, and not just be pulling them on just because they're going to see this data.
Well, so let's talk about risk and needs for a minute, because there's risk and needs that's criminogenic risk and needs. But we're working in family treatment court, and we are different. I mean, we do have criminogenic needs. Like I said, some of those folks have it, but I would argue that because we have a system, who's child welfare? Yeah, because we have a system, you'll work real hard to keep people out of court, right? Like, you're going to try real hard to do in-home family preservation. You're going to do all of those other things before you either remove the child and or bring the petition to court. So I would argue that we've already got a system in place that if they're going to come to court, if they're going to have a petition in our courts, they are high risk, high need.
So
Because they're really
I have one little
complicated.
tiny caveat to that.
Yeah.
So yes, so Jeff Kushner suggested we use the RAND. Well, I used the RAND for 5 years, and I was like, everybody that I screen is high risk, so this tool is useless. But so I stopped using it. But what I am not getting is there's a little population that have really high, like, criminal thinking errors.
Mhm.
And I want to make sure we're addressing those and identifying them and making sure we're meeting that treatment need and not missing out, because I feel like that is a component we need to address, because we do have a lot of criminal cases. as
Right,
well.
right.
And also not taking those antisocial people that we're gonna make worse.
Right. So and your folks are not on probation, or they are?
Most of them are actually.
Right.
Most of them have been in trouble enough that now have a PO, so I know they're high risk.
Right. But aren't they doing a risk assessment and criminogenic assessment on them
Where
in probation?
the moron, which clearly sucks.
Got it. All right. We'll work on that.
To talk about that, so I'm a PO in the Yellowstone County. We're going through a retraining with the MORA system, as it was, we were supposed to be recertifying every 3 years, and that hadn't happened. And with our new data quality assurance coming in, we're all having to recertify by April of 2023. And they are updating it for regional risk and needs like factors, so it is more applicable for this. I will also say a lot of times it is evaluator error more so than the assessment error. And if you just ask the questions as yes, no, whatever, that's the answer you're going to get. But if you actually sit and motivationally interview with your offender, you get the information you need and have a more accurate and validated assessment.
Right.
We also have the WERNA for women that we do, which is a longer assessment that brings in sexual abuse and trauma as well.
Okay.
But being trained by you, I mean, and we're a straight family treatment court, that we're low barrier. I mean, it's, the eligibility's pretty low that you have an open DN case, you have a substance use disorder with one of the parents. I think we've even expanded the living in Flathead and the ability to take some other counties, and then the federal disqualifying violent crimes, and that's it.
That's it. Yeah, and you'll see a slide in
and
here that
so
says just that.
Kirstin challenged us of you're saying you want to get the right people in, and we've adopted your view of saying this is who we can help, and then make adjustments.
And it's not really Kirstin. It's the research. I'm just spouting the research, but yes, yeah.
And we don't vote.
Is it about this? Because I promised him. Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I don't know your name.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, one thing is, if you have a chance, we struggle a little bit sometimes. Because we do see so many really traumatized people, complex trauma, complex personality disorders. A lot of our trouble is figuring out when to let people go. We have people who are there for 3 years, and I swear they're in their happy place. They don't ever want to leave.
Right.
And we really, I think as a team, we just don't know what to do with those guys.
Right.
Because they don't really want to graduate. They don't do everything we want. Do we kick them out? Do we just say, this is the best we've done, great job, shake your hands, see you later, come visit us? We struggle with that.
Yeah, and I mean, I think, everybody always asks us, like, when do we let somebody go? Like, that's just a conversation that I have with teams and all of us at, the FDC TTA have with teams. And there is no, like, clear, obvious, I mean, there are a few clear, obvious answers. Like, if something, like, drastically horrible happens, like, we're not going to keep hold of them. But most of the time, it's really more art than science. It's, like, just trying to figure out, and I'm trying to think, no, I heard Carolyn's all the way to the end on phases. But that's one of the things that we talk about, is that we need to, there are some folks who are going to graduate, like they did everything they needed to do, and they're like, yes, you hit all the marks, go off, and we're going to hopefully keep supporting them, because, recovery is lifelong. There are some folks who have substantially met the requirements, and they're successfully discharged, you know, we're gonna count that as a success. It's not like they didn't hit all the marks, they didn't, you know, close all the circles, all those things, but, you know, they've made a lot of progress. They've made a lot of progress. There are some folks that we're gonna let go as a neutral discharge because something happens. You know, they end up moving out of state. They end up with a severe health issue, and it's just like it's not gonna be helpful to be here. And then there are those folks who were like, you know, we've sort of met maximum load. Like we've offered you what we've got. We've tried all these things, and we don't really have much more to offer you. And those are the hard ones, I think. You know, those are really the hard ones for sure.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So, we've had a couple of people who have come into our program or who have screened for our program where substance use is not the top thing that CPS has flagged the case for. A lot of it has to do with like codependency and unsafe significant others. And it seems, listening to the last presentation, like those cases have kind of been worrying me from the get-go already of what our resources are. Like
Our last session or Carolyn's?
Carolyn's
Yeah.
last session. As far as codependency versus, you know, somebody coming in who is going through withdrawals and cravings and all, like that set of needs versus somebody who's like, yeah, I've been sober for a year, I've had my baby with me, I just really love the guy.
Yeah, well, and you know,
Amazing against me.
that, right, so then, you know, we don't want to, whether we're talking about family treatment court or adult criminal court or veterans court, I mean, treatment courts by and large, and you know, y'all just saw a session of like different kinds of treatment courts, but by and large, they're the most intensive, quite frankly, invasive, community-based interventions we've got. There is no other intervention where you've got somebody coming into court every 2 weeks and seeing a judge and having this team surrounding them, meeting weekly in many cases, talking about what you need and, you know, problem solving that. And so we don't want to, you know, if you're going to have, so the slide that I was telling Judge I put in here, let's see if I can get to it. Where did I put it? There it is. All right. So we do have different levels of intervention in family treatment courts too. What we've mostly been talking about, what we've mostly been working towards is this traditional family treatment court. There's a court petition that's filed, the children are out of home, we've got that assessed moderate to severe substance use disorder. We're going to be doing that intensive case management, all of these other things, frequent court reviews. We're going to work with them for probably 12 to 18 months. That's the traditional family treatment court. There are, in many places, and you may want to do this, look at this question of more of the family preservation family treatment court. So in that case, again, we've got a court petition filed, but the children are in home. We've left the kids in home. They've still got that moderate to severe substance use disorder. They've still got all of those needs. But there's more going on for them. They've got something in there, it's a little more of that protective factor that we're saying, yeah, there's a lot of need here, but we don't absolutely have to remove the kids, particularly if we're there and we're in and out of the home, we know what's going on, we're really closely monitoring the situation. It's really nice if we can, and you can have these two things concurrent in your, you can have both of these families in your just cases. These folks, though, are probably going to end up, they're going to move out of our caseloads quicker because we're trying to stabilize and solve fewer issues, fewer problems. So that's, kind of for lack of another, family preservation, family treatment courts. Then we've got these two options, and these are this pre-file model. And there are places across the country where this is happening a lot. And we've got, in this intensive in-home, this might be for a family that, like they are just, they cycle in and out. Like there's a call, we get them in, we go in, we get them stabilized, we pull out, like then 6 months, 8 months later, there's a call, we go in, we work with, like this family that just, like it doesn't quite get to that point where we need to remove, but we're just like all these services that we've done hasn't really got it. We haven't really got them stabilized. So this intensive in-home, in jurisdictions that are doing this, sometimes what child welfare goes ahead and drafts the petition. And they say, look, these are our concerns. They are not insignificant. But we've got this program, we want you to work this. It's more intensive than what we've done before. You're going to not see a judge generally. It's not going to come in front of the judge probably because we don't have a petition and we don't want to break that sort of legal, like, you don't want to get involved in a case that may or may not be coming to you. Often it's the case, the coordinator who's maybe like meeting with that family every month, let's say, or every 2 weeks or something, and the team meets with that parent and they come in, or there's kind of services and supports that happen. But we know that we can bounce it into the court when we need to. Some jurisdictions have a retired judge who sits over that and kind of serves in that role. So that's sort of the intensive, and then there's a moderate in-home, which is, again, like it's a bump up of what maybe child welfare has. So it's more of a team approach. There's just sort of, we're using more contingency management. We have peer support that's included in there, all of that kind of thing. We also, in 16th Judicial, this is something that you might want to think about. In more rural communities, there is another way that we can go, which is we're just going to change the court system, period. And we're going to say, you know what? We've learned a lot about how families recover and how to support these high needs, really complex families that come into our dependency courts. And so we're not going to start a separate court because we don't, we're rural, we don't have that many families, quite frankly. But what we're going to do is we're going to make sure that we've got that communication across agencies. We're going to make sure that we're getting people assessed and connected into treatment. We're going to set them up to come into court more often than those ASFA requirements. Because we know that actually the piece in family treatment court that is such a big difference, that makes that difference, and is a big piece of why it's twice as likely to stably reunify, is that we are seeing that case, we're holding the parents and the family and the system accountable to what needs to get done every 2 weeks. There was a study a long time ago, and it's funny, like, I I know this study existed, but I swear I can't find it. The Bar Association did the study. And they looked at, okay, on average, from the time that judge ordered something to happen in a child welfare case. So judge orders, you know, child welfare to work with the parent to get this particular assessment done, right? So in that case, both child welfare has to do something and the parent has to do something. So judge orders this. Then on average, and then they've got, you know, their next review is maybe 3 months off. On average, when did the agency and the parent and everybody act on that order? Do you think?
A week before they
9 days. Yep. 9 days before their next hearing, they got it going. So if that's, and you know, I mean, it makes sense, right? Like, we know that we work to the next crisis. So if we know we've got to get in to see the judge in 2 weeks, well, it can't go to the bottom of the pile. We actually have to do it. Like, we have to leave court and get it done that day or tackle it the next day. And so you could do a lot of what we're talking about in family treatment courts by just like scheduling a few more intermittent hearings, especially early on in the case until things kind of stabilize. And bringing them back, like being able to bring them back in if things start to slide sideways. Questions about that? Pull us off center.
I just have a comment though.
Yeah.
She was talking about the parent that is not SUD. And, you know, I think it's important to look to your treatment providers to see if they offer codependency treatment or some sort of treatment for your other family member, because when the non-SUD person understands addiction and understands how to go about setting appropriate boundaries and responding to the early recovery of the partner, that there's more success.
Right, yes, yeah. I mean, I would say that sometimes substance use is more on the moderate side in our family treatment court cases, but we've got all this other stuff that makes it just really complicated that we're going to have to untangle for the parent, for the children. Often the children have really severe needs that have also got to be addressed, and all of that is getting managed within the family treatment court. And because we've got that team, because we've got that wraparound approach, we've got a better shot at getting it done in that time frame. Other comments, questions from what we've been talking about? I mean, this is, somebody asked, like, what is the referral? Like, how do we get cases in? You know, because we saw this yesterday. If the family treatment court is twice as effective, 2 times more likely to reunify, except we're not serving very many families. I mean, think about how many, some of you are serving more, but we're not serving very many families. And we've got to, you know, what would you say if you're thinking about your child welfare cases, what percentage of the cases coming into court have substance use, co-occurring mental health as that underlying cause? 20%? 50%? 90%? More like 90. Yeah? Yeah. So, in theory, we should be working with 90% of the cases that are, have a court petition. 90% of those cases could just come in. Not up on that, like, just sort of levels of intervention. Increasingly, jurisdictions are actually deciding that, we're just, like, family treatment court is just the way we're gonna treat these cases. It's not gonna be like, oh, please, sign this participation agreement, please come in, please do this, like, like trying to lure them in. They do the assessment, they look at it and say, yeah, this is an appropriate case, family, for family treatment court, and they offer it, before adjudication, they offer it at adjudication. And, if the parent still says, no, I think I'll try this on my own, or no, it's really my next door neighbor, I don't really have this problem, I don't really want to be with you. We get to disposition, you put together a case plan, the case plan gets ordered at disposition, and the way we get that case plan done in this jurisdiction is you go to family treatment court.
That's not how it happens for us,
It's not, but it could.
You
Why? What's the difference?
Yeah, what happens for us is, well, I think what I worry about is we're, again, I think we provide a lot more services, I think we're really helpful, I think we have a better outcome, but we're a pain in the butt. It's longer, harder, difficult, and defense attorneys say, and we don't always get kids back as quickly. I mean, we're actually a little more paranoid maybe than, we have more people more people to make happy, if that makes any sense. And more people to go, I don't know if this is such a good idea. So we're I think we're really helpful, but we're a bulky and awkward beast. And I think defense attorneys say, I don't know if you want to. So we're where you come where your defense attorney says, you either go through the family treatment court or they're just going to terminate. This is your one last shot at it.
Well,
is what I think happens to us. Is that true or false?
I think we're getting a lot of people with criminal cases, and they're being sentenced into our court. So their CPS case is secondary, and their criminal case is the primary. And so one of their conditions for not getting revoked, because a lot of them are looking at very serious time.
Right.
And so their conditions will say, this is a suspended sentence conditioned on you successfully graduating. And our county attorneys have gotten very specific about the language. Upon successfully graduating the program, which can lead to some really big issues when we're 2 years into a program and we have a parent, like kids are home, things are good, but they haven't quite checked all those boxes. And so we would, if we were doing criteria, we would be like, you did good, but you haven't really met graduating, but if we don't graduate you, then you go to prison.
You're revoked, yeah.
So we get a lot of people like that. And the defense attorneys are very, very important.
Yeah, the jurisdictions, I was just with one of the jurisdictions, rural jurisdiction, rural Oklahoma, not unlike a lot of y'all's, a lot of ICWA tribal cases that are being managed through the state child welfare system, the state courts. They made this shift, and when I was there, they had 36 parents in the court and a couple more coming in. And and she just, she has all the folks there and they work it, but they're getting better outcomes. And I was talking with the judge and the coordinator afterwards, and I said, so how's it been? Like, are you getting, like, do you just have all these angry parents and they're not doing anything? And she said, we kind of wondered if that would happen. But, actually, we had people who would voluntarily come in, and then they would just get gone, not do what they needed to do, you know, throw up every kind of barrier and speed bump. You know, and now everybody's in, and we've got folks who, you know, initially as we offered it, you know, before adjudication, at adjudication, but before, you know, disposition, and they said, no, 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 and then they came in and it was like, okay, well, this is how we're gonna do this. She said, you know, what happened is we overcame some of those, like they were scared. They didn't think they could do it, they didn't want to do it, all of those things, and they got here and they've done great. You know, we like just kind of bullied our way through some of those barriers, and they've done great. And she said, so, you know, overall, we've come out way ahead in doing this approach. And, you know, so what about the defense attorney, you know, what about the parent attorneys? What about all of this? And she said, you know, it was, she said, you know, I'll admit we've been able to do this because we have collegiality. Like we don't have agency attorneys and parent attorneys like at each other's throats. Like everybody in our community has sort of kind of agreed that we get better outcomes when we take this approach. So yeah, it's intense, but we're getting much better outcomes. Families are being reunified. And they've gotten to a point where they, you know, they actually feel like they're probably getting to trial home placement and some of that sooner, but they're continuing to work with the family until, you know, because we don't want to like just get the kids home and close the case. I don't know if any of you have got that going on, but getting the kids home is a really big, it's a danger spot, right? Like it's hard to parent. Like that's where you need lots of support. That's where you really need us there to sort of make sure that everything's there. And we want the eyes on what's going on too. But yeah, so she has said she's really pleased with that transition that they made. I don't know. You know, we do, whatever we do, often we get parent attorneys who are, or child welfare or whomever, like we're gonna try absolutely everything else. And by the time they get referred to the family treatment court, it's that Hail Mary pass, right? Like we are 6-8 months into the case, or we've like burned through, we've like been absolutely determined to like do that family preservation case, and they've burned through every community treatment provider, and every, you know, like all of that is burned through. And we really need to, because think about like if we, back in the day, and some of you have been around longer like me, we used to not, when we assessed, we used to put people in lower levels of treatment and let them fail out of the lower level of treatment, and we would just escalate and escalate, right? Yeah. And we thought we were doing a good thing, but we weren't. What was happening is time was passing and more damage was happening, and we weren't getting it right. So now we've figured out we got to do that assessment, figure out that level of care, and put them in that level of care. Like sometimes we got to negotiate with them a little while, right? Because often they assess at residential and they're like, I'm not going to residential, we got to work with them. But we assess them and we put them where they need to go, that level of care. We need to do the same thing with family treatment court. We need to not let them fail out of lower levels of care as more damage happens and more time goes by. We need to like really think about who's going to benefit, and let's just get them in. Let's talk about it. When child welfare goes out, let's talk about this team approach, this spot where we can really surround you with resources and some accountability, some supports. It's really easy. Recovery is hard. I mean, talking about, managing through, if you've got methamphetamine, I mean, the brain scans, we didn't look at that brain scan today, I don't think, but if you look at those brain scans, when you stop use of methamphetamine drop through the floor. You feel terrible for a while. And so we need to really surround those folks. Really meet them with that, support and empathy and love, because otherwise all they see is, this is terrible. Like, that was terrible, but this is really bad too. Like, this is not better.
Yeah.
That was bad, but this is not better. So we want to talk with folks. We want to bring them in. We need to, somebody asked, and I promised to get answers to I'm going to answer as many of those questions that we generated yesterday as possible, but, somebody asked, how does treatment get collateral information? So, treatment, when you send somebody for an assessment at treatment, let treatment know what you know. Child welfare, let them know that the whole reason that you got called out was because it was, an active DUI and the police took the kids out of the car. Or let treatment know that the reason you got called in was because the neighbors said, like, there's parties at all hours and I'm seeing all kinds of, alcohol and people smoking and all of this stuff in the yard. Let them know, because otherwise, poor treatment is sitting there and they're like, hi, welcome, come on in. And, all they can do is ask questions and take the answers of the participant. But they can have a much better conversation, right? Like, if you know some stuff.
Our judges won't even accept an assessment unless we have collateral information.
Nice.
So what I do, when I send a screening to the treatment providers, is I also send an affidavit. So a lot of information like
Yep.
history.
Good, absolutely. Anything that you've got, the affidavit, anything that share it. Often child welfare, y'all go out and you do a drug test, right? Like, if you've got a reason, you'll do a drug test early on. Share that with treatment, let them know. All of that information. I think it's in here. So this is what Judge said. This is really what we're recommending at this point. After years of doing, I've done family treatment courts for 22 years. And I've learned stuff along the way. We've grown as we've come along. And this is really it. There's some, jurisdictional stuff. You can also, work that out. But active child welfare case, assessed substance use disorder, refer them to FTC. Or if you're going to go the way that Kane County, Oklahoma did, you've got your adjudicated case and your dispositional order, and that's just what we're going to do. And, part of why we've gotten to that really simple referral criteria is that we do have all of these studies that are telling us that, yeah, actually, we do just as well with all of this stuff. Just as well or better. Just as well or better. So we don't want to, I work with a lot of courts, and sometimes they'll say, well, if they don't have housing, or if they don't have transportation, I don't want to set them up to fail, right? I don't want to put them into this family treatment court or this treatment court generally, where they've got to get to court and they've got to get to, their drug screens, and they've got to get to treatment, and they live out in the boonies and they have no transportation. Well, twice as likely to stably reunify. So what we're saying is, if you're poor or rural, well, sorry, you're less likely to reunify because you're not going to get this intervention because I screened you out because you didn't have transportation or housing or something.
Which is actually discrimination.
Which is actually discrimination. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
All right. I don't know that any of you, I don't think any of you are still doing this, but for the longest time,
We still do
people would vote. Stop voting.
this. We still do.
No voting. Actually, this must be an old slide because during all of the election stuff, somebody made me change the slide to eliminate the word vote, do not vote. But no, like if they meet criteria, they meet criteria. We really don't know who's going to make it or not. Like we've got people who've got all the resources in the world. We had a case in Flathead. I mean, she was educated, she had all the resources in the world. Whew, not going to make it. Still a little shaky over there, too. Yeah, we don't know who's going to make it. Just if they meet criteria, put them in. And especially don't be like, oh, yeah, I worked with their sister, their mother, that aunt, grandmother. That's just a bad family. We don't want to do that. Right? Because we got a lot of rural communities. We know those families. If anything, that's like a reason to absolutely put them in because we really do. Just like Carolyn said this morning, treatment courts, honest to God, have that chance of truly stopping that intergenerational cycle. We really do. How cool is that? Like, we really can stop that. And those children that we're working with today, when we go back next week, really may never come into our systems because we worked with their parents. That's pretty cool. Okay. I've been blowing past some of the standards language. We really want to get to this objective and systematic referral. We want to get away from like child welfare. Like, there's a lot of turnover in child welfare, right? A lot of turnover. And the problem with that turnover is that the supervisor or the CPS worker who understands family treatment court and like gets it and wants to refer all their cases, well, he or she goes off to, go be a certified treatment provider, gosh darn it. And they leave us, and then who's going to send, like now the new person doesn't know anything about us and we don't get their cases. So we've got to figure out a way, and all of you have an opportunity to interject and make sure that that referral gets to us. So child welfare, you've got that opportunity with looking at your caseloads. Supervisors, you've got to touch every single case on a regular basis. You can be looking for those cases, sending them in. Agency attorneys, like, you should be, as you're looking at that petition, bringing it to court, you should be making that stop and making that referral so that the family treatment court coordinator and the peer recovery support specialist are meeting them right there at that preliminary hearing. Judges, you have an opportunity if you've got to refer those cases over or order those cases in. Parent attorneys, treatment providers, all of you have that chance to see that case and make sure it gets to the family treatment court. But it's best if we just got like a system. Just everybody who meets this goes. All right, I'm gonna play this video from,
Another aspect,
I know we've got some folks who are new who weren't here, so these are videos that came out of our peer learning courts. These are our mentor family treatment courts across the country. This one is in Pima County, Arizona, which is Tucson.
another aspect of early identification or early engagement with parents is that, and this is an important part of our process, is that I think it rules out some of the bias that can be involved or present in some professionals' minds sometimes. By really recruiting or trying to engage every parent who has an open case as early as possible and not waiting for referrals from professionals, it can rule out those situations where referrals are only being made by attorneys or other professionals because they believe that that individual has a good chance of being successful. And I think what many of us have learned over the years is that our guesses or our judgment about who's likely to be successful early on in a case are not always very accurate. And so if your program is dependent on individuals sending a referral in, I think that can inherently have some awkwardness and some bias, perhaps.
Do you have the, do any of you feel like you've got a good systematic process for referral?
No, that's the big thing I would address in my goals.
Okay. That's your one thing you're taking back.
Take home.
Yeah. These are some tools, the Gaines short screener, Uncode, child welfare. You can institute the Uncode. It's 4 questions. Ask every single family those 4 questions. That's a great thing for y'all to do in the 16th as you're starting to think about it. You're probably already doing a version of it, but if anything, kind of pops, that's an automatic referral. State of Georgia put in place a really nice automatic process of they do the Uncode, and then they've got a series of questions, and what was the drug, like whether they tested positive for particular kinds of drugs, if it's heroin, if it's methamphetamine, any of those, really, it's not just marijuana, it's not just alcohol, it's some of those other kinds of drugs that are often associated with criminogenic. Any of those things, if they've got a criminal case, if they've had a previous intervention with child welfare, any of those things are a yes, automatic referral to family treatment court.
So like in the Uncode, we have 6 questions. One of them is, when you are drinking, do you feel like you often can't stop, or do you often feel like you can't stop? So if they answer yes to that, just that one question, they're automatically qualified.
No,
I thought it was like
it's like 2 or it's usually 2 or more, but you've got it like it's 2 to 3, but you've got to have that discussion. Like some jurisdictions say if it's 2, yes. Some say if it's 3, yes.
My experience with the cage in particular is that only people who are willing to be truthful.
Right.
I mean,
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But, it's not just the screener. It's not just that tool, but it's also, signs and symptoms. You go out to the house and you can smell drugs. You see the evidence of alcohol. You see other evidence. You've got the corroborating report. You've got a drug screen. Any of those things, all of those things say, it still doesn't mean that we've got a moderate to severe substance use disorder, but any of those things is a yes, we go to assessment.
And the reason why I brought that up to with the whole new assessment tool is because there are people that we do bring into our court once in a while that, like like I was saying earlier. They'll get through the program a few months in, they'll be maxed out in treatment because they're done, they don't want to do it anymore. They got their kid back, they don't, they got a job, they're doing, IOP, a low level, and it's just like, did we screen them properly? So, I mean, they seem like they're low risk, low risk at that point.
Yeah, I
And that's
wonder,
why-
I guess I would ask, like, how did they end up with a court case?
Right.
In a lot of, and that's kind of like my earlier question as well, like, I could be misspeaking, but I want to say we had somebody who got accepted into our program and started a day treatment. Like, that was the, like, skipped, or not day treatment, sorry, relapse prevention. No,
Oh,
relapse
they
prevention.
started relapse.
Yeah, they started with relapse prevention. Like, they didn't do day treatment, they didn't do IOP, and so those are the people that I'm like, is this a problem?
Maybe, well, and so in those cases, that's where we've got to look at that, like, lower level. We're not going to ask them to be with us for 12 to 18 months. Because we could actually be causing problems at that point. So we've got to, in that case, though, you've got to do something a little bit different.
Right, and then so basically on that, the person that I was talking about that, she got maxed out, she left, she got her kid back, that's all she needed, she didn't have no criminal cases pending, so she didn't really have like an incentive to stay in the program. Anyway, she started out in IOP, and so I'm like, well, what is she going to be doing beyond IOP when she levels down in a few months, So, I mean, those are things that I question. And that's why I asked them, like, are you using the right tool?
But then, are you requiring them, once they're done with IOP, are they engaging in the community, so the supports of getting a sponsor and building those pro-social networks and...
Yeah, because you can manage to be compliant. You can manage to be compliant, but that doesn't mean that you're in recovery.
Yep.
I can check boxes, but that doesn't mean that I've internalized recovery, that I've like really figured out those 4 domains. If you're not going to go, Kirstin's like just, get to disposition and this is how we do it here, and you're still trying to convince everybody to come in. These are, so this is the, having an automatic referral, just like that way, like you meet this criteria, you get referred. Getting your family treatment court coordinator and preferably your peer recovery support specialist to attend the shelter care hearings. Meet with the parents right there. What research tells us is that the earlier we engage people, the faster we get them into treatment, the more likely they are to actually engage and do the work and stick with us. What happens when we don't engage them real early on is that's when they're like, oh, my kids are safe with my sister. I'm really ambivalent about like giving up my drugs and my friends and my boyfriend. Maybe I'll just go do this, and they get gone. We lose them. And then they get pregnant again, and then we get them again. So we really need to try to get them as early as possible. And that means, those automatic referrals, getting to shelter care hearing. If you haven't done this, like really think about what's the elevator speech, having really simple messaging that anybody on the team, anybody in the community can pick up and hand to a parent, hand to a family member and say, this is what family treatment court is, this is what it does. Yes, it's intensive, but it's intensive and it's supportive. Now, you heard Carolyn say it this morning, like if we say like this is better, you better be better. Don't suck. Don't harm people, right?
Yeah.
Don't do harm. Do not do harm. Treatment courts have done harm in the past. So if we're going to say this is a better way, make sure that you're a better way. Follow the research. You heard it yesterday, and you'll hear it tomorrow from Helen Harvard's. Don't use jail. It doesn't work. Actually, sanctions don't really work. They're not effective, actually. Make sure that everybody knows what you're doing. Requiring eligible parents to observe an FTC hearing. Like, let them see what this thing really is about. Have your peer recovery specialist sit with them as they observe, so they can talk them through what's happening. They can talk to them, they can engage with them, they can build those connections, bridge that. Implementing a test drive phase, letting people just try it out. Like, so even they get started even before we get to adjudication or disposition, and they start working with us. And because again, we want to bring them in as quickly as we can and not let them get gone. So by bringing them into a test drive phase, they're just kind of doing it, but they're not officially entered.
So you're talking about pre-induction?
Mm-hmm.
So let them try it out for a little while.
Like let them just come and observe?
Yep, let them do it, like go to treatment, like come meet with you, like do all the things, come to court, but we're not gonna, like talk to the judge.
So the whole thing with our situation, both our courts, is when we utilize Rimrock as our provider, our participants would actually go down to Silverleaf versus the main facility. That's specifically designed for treatment courts. So
talk to Rimrock. They're your friends. They're your partners.
I mean,
say we want to bring them in.
How would you bill for that though?
They got Medicaid.
And I don't know if they would with Remarks real big on it, but not letting anybody in on any groups that aren't like in the group. You know?
They're in the
Would
group.
be in
They're going to go to treatment, whether they come into family treatment court or not. We want to get them into treatment. They still need treatment.
So maybe just have them go to the main facility.
Or maybe go to the main facility and bring them over. Whatever.
Engaging them, we'll see how
Yeah.
they do. Okay.
So, we've talked about this. I'll talk about it until I'm this color. We really have got to meet everybody with engagement. We've got to meet everybody without judgment, with empathy, because they already know they messed up. They know they messed up. They know it, they've heard it from their parents, they've heard it from their neighbor, they've heard it from their, ex, whatever. They know they've messed up. We don't actually need to tell them that. They know. They got that. What we need to tell them is, yes, but we also believe that you can recover and that you love your children. I mean, they do love their children, even if they make like they do crazy stuff that you're thinking, are you sure you love your kids? They do. They love their children. And often what they think is, I know I'm a lousy parent and I messed up, and so I love my kid, and maybe, she's going to be better with somebody else. She's going to be better with that, nice foster care family, down in the valley that is going to get her into ballet lessons or whatever that is, right? So we need to help them see that they can do that. We've got a number of really nice resources on stigma. I really recommend, so this is a publication from our partner agency. We've also got a practice academy session on combating stigma. It's a 12-minute video. No, actually, Recovery Capital is 12 minutes. The stigma one is a little more. But it's really good. But we've got a nice, set of tools that that you can go through with your team. But, we talked yesterday about that baggage that we all carry. We don't even realize that we're meeting folks with some of that stigmatizing language, if we're saying things like clean and dirty drug screens, you know, like that's, you know, we're not clean and dirty, your laundry is clean and dirty. You know, it's positive or it's negative. We can do that. That's a tiny shift that we can make in how we meet folks. So really, you know, because they can feel your vibe. They feel your vibe, whether you're gonna like meet them with lots of judgment or not. So, you know, kind of if we think that we are in the business of helping people and reunifying families, then we got to figure that part out. We really need to look at our data and ask, you know, who is coming into the treatment court? Who's getting referred? Who's saying yes? Who is falling out in process? And, you know, who is succeeding? We need to look at that data. And we really need to look at our community and look at our child welfare community and say, like, we should be admitting 90% of those cases. And we need to figure out why we're not admitting 90% of those cases. We need to figure out why some families are getting referred and others are not. We need to figure out why some families are saying yes and others are not. Because again, if we've got historically marginalized populations that have a lot of reason to distrust the court system. You know, here we've got a lot of Native American families. They got a whole lot of reasons to not trust us. State systems have not done them any favors. And so you're going to put me into this thing that, like, you're going to be all up in my business? I don't know if I want to take that risk. I have not got a lot of evidence to suggest that's a great thing for me. So we've got to make sure that we work through that, we talk about that. We bring our partners on who are going to meet them where they're at.
I'm trying to figure out how to articulate this with engagement and who gets in and who doesn't. It seems, and I'm fairly new to our court system as well, so we seem to have, obviously this is a family drug court, and so typically we are seeing like the moms with the children, with potentially the father, birth father, also having the same needs that the mother does, like whether that's drug addiction, mental health, or whatever, but there's also like a DV component, him on her, and to where she will get all of the services that Family Recovery Court offers, and they are just stuck on like a regular track DN. Is there any way, thinking of a family model in general, regardless of whether that whole family would entize together, coming to a point of like co-parenting or something with the perpetrator, would that be engaging them in like a separate track?
Yep.
Or
Yeah. A number of courts, period, but family treatment courts, have actually implemented a men's track and women's track. And, you know, they are really happy with the results. And I've seen it in large urban communities like Oklahoma City. I work in Oklahoma, as you can figure out. Or in very rural communities like rural New Hampshire. But they've been really happy with kind of keeping them separate.
So is that a men's and women's track when we're talking about a family where domestic violence is a part of the case, or I mean,
Everybody, that's just everybody.
That's just the status quo.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because if they are going to have couples, it's not uncommon for there to be some issues that need to be worked through.
well, even regardless of whether the lovebirds will get back together
Right.
or not, excuse me, they still, because there's a child involved, they still will eventually have to learn to co-parent or figure out how to avoid dropping off at supervised visits or whatever, like doing the walk across the Walmart parking lot.
Doing the family system therapy, doing family therapy with each kiddo, with the therapist and then the family all together.
So I had this is so weird. So I had 4 people, 2 couples. They were cousins. Okay? And it was really rough because you could not have all 4 of them in. Well, so we got 1 couple in, and then they had a domestic violence. So what we would do is we would have her be there at like 10 o'clock, and then he would be there at 11:30. And then our peer support would walk her down, get her in her car, and off she would go. And then Boyd's, and then we got the other couple, that was really bad. But once we got one of those couples stabilized, we had them doing, the people who got along came on 1 week. The opposite people came on the separate week. So it worked out really well. But so Boyd started this untangling relationships, and they came to me, and boy, that was such a game changer. I mean, it took like 6 weeks, but once they hit that 6-8 week mark, we were like, okay, you guys can go back to the detention center, we're good. You guys do it. But yeah.
Cool. Thank you.
These are great questions. All right, so this is another one of our peer learning courts. They're in Travis County, Texas, so that's Austin, Texas. And they've done a lot of work on trying to figure out, because they were looking at their family treatment court, and they noticed that they mostly had a bunch of white women. And that's not necessarily what the population looks like in Austin, Texas. So they started asking themselves some questions.
Having a formal plan set out has been very important to us. We do always focus on the data to make sure that we're tracking the improvements that we make. We've done a 6-month look back on all court cases that were referred to make sure that the cases that should be in the drug court program do come to the drug court program. And if they don't, figure out why that is. And once we started digging down deep, we were able to identify other systemic barriers that were causing some disproportionality in our program. That was not what we were expecting to see. We're expecting to serve the similar population in the child welfare system, which we know is a disproportionate number of families of color, and we were not seeing that in our program that invests in these families, that keeps the family preserved rather than removing children. And so we wanted to make sure that we were fair in the way that our program was provided. So we started working even harder looking at what those barriers were for the families that did not get referred. And we have been able to even look at, in our program, other systemic barriers that may prevent families of color from being successful. We have identified that we have an intersection at race and gender, so our Black mothers were having lower success rates, and we've just started an initiative to improve the way that we engage and support our Black mothers, looking at what additional issues may cause them an inability to be successful and where the program is responsible. So we're always looking at a systemic approach. We're always looking at the data and how the data can help us to be equitable, and then we're really investing in bringing down those barriers.
If you work with me, I've beaten on you about this. But a lot of those barriers, if you've got low referrals, if you've got barriers, the way to solve them, really, truly, is to set up this collaborative structure where we've got these 3 levels of this governance structure of 3 levels. We've got your team. These are those folks that are working, touching the case, working with the families, doing all that real work. There's The steering committee are their bosses, their supervisors. They're the ones who, you know, like, if this group identifies an issue, you know, that keeps coming up in staffing, or you see that you're not getting referrals, or you see that your referrals are disproportionate, or you see that there's a certain segment of families that are not accepting your offers of admissions because they've got certain barriers to participation. You take it to the steering committee first, and you talk to them and you say, you know, this is what we're seeing, can you help? We are having folks who are refusing to come in. We've got men, dads, we'd like to have dads, right? Because they exist in this world, takes two. And the dads are saying no because they say, I've got to work all day, and I can't not, you know, go to work and earn money for my family, you know, all of this. So we go to treatment and we say, we really need a night group, because we've got folks who are working day jobs and we want them to keep their jobs, you know, but we need a night group. So that steering committee is going to help you deal with those kinds of issues. That steering committee is going to have your supervisor or maybe even your child welfare director, so you can say, look, we're not getting the referrals from your folks. They're sending us the Hail Mary referrals at 6 months, 8 months in. We've got to fix that. That's a child welfare issue to help fix. So that's going to be your steering committee that's going to help fix it. And then your third level, this executive oversight group, that's your, you know, county commissioners, that's your city council, that's your hospital administrator person, that's your maybe Parks and Rec or housing person at the county. They're going to help you think about solving those much bigger issues. You know, we've been working with Flathead on housing for 3 years now. We're getting closer. We really are actually getting closer. We have worked on this for 3 years and we are actually getting closer. But that's not, the team can't solve housing in Flathead County. The steering committee can't solve housing in Flathead County. It's got to go to this level. Judge, you want to say anything about having implemented this? The pros and cons?
No, I think there's the pros. The middle row of how frequently you meet, we can't achieve that. I mean, I think it's wonderful. In Montana, none of us, this is, I mean, for some of the people on the team, but from other people on the team, we have other day jobs that we have to do. And so in the states that this is their only work. But it has been valuable and it does help. But
I would say that's twice a year, and this is, I would like you to do it every other month. It's just like, yeah, we're working on quarterly.
Do other teams do it that frequently?
We don't even have a steering committee.
No.
We used to have a steering committee. I think we met every other, I think it was every other month. Yeah, I think we would try to do monthly, but it's all volunteers on our, it was a lot of volunteers. So we would do it at lunch right before.
Right. Well, they're all volunteers, but like, I mean, what's in it for them? I'm only going to come to a meeting if there's a reason for me to go to that meeting. So you need to give them like real problems to solve. I mean, if you've got the right people at your steering level, it's their problem. It's the head, you know, it's your child welfare director's problem that we're not getting these cases into this program that is going to make a difference for their families. I mean, it's not like we're begging a favor for them to come to the meeting. That really is like that's in their wheelhouse. You know, it's treatment's issue, that it's the treatment program's issue if we've got lots of no-shows because we've got a mismatch of where treatment group is being held, or we've got a treatment provide, like, or we need to have a night group or whatever that is. Like, that's their wheelhouse. So we need to give them real issues to solve. So these are some of the things that you would bring to them to work on. And then we've got, these drop-off points. I mean, look at your data. Look at where, look at where the problems are, and those are the spots that we need to then target for change. Hannah's going back and she's working on my girls. You want to say anything about what you think you're going to tackle?
Well, I do have some really good team players from CFS that have joined the team. And so because they're the only ones that can solve that problem of what happens at CFS. So they agreed to go back and talk to their intake workers and make sure that there was, scheduling me to come in on a quarterly basis and talk at their treatment team meetings. So they are going to do those changes internally. The other hitch was, like you said, people have an attorney, and the attorney, suggests that they don't do it because it's hard, it's time consuming, blah, blah, blah. So then we become the Hail Mary. And we know, anyway, our experience has been that family treatment court doesn't work at the end of their case. So then we were going to try to meet with all of the attorneys and kind of ask, what are the barriers to you referring to treatment court? So those were our two kind of big objectives to be working on.
I mean, we do really well at engagement and getting them in, because I think the buy-in is, now that we've been in existence 3 or 4 years, we do get the kids in the house faster. And so that urban legend helps us. But once we get to trial home visit is when we lose them, as they kind of drop off.
So do they have a contract, like I am committing to a minimum of your family treatment court?
We don't use any times anymore, because we have people that come in at different points. Just like you all are saying, they may be in IOP, they have that DN case, so we can't say it's going to be a year because they're further along than somebody that's just freshly had kids removed. But the trial home visit is our data drop point. And we've kind of reevaluated on graduation that we probably thought that was more our goal, and we looked at it through the parents' lens and decided reunification was their goal, and we've helped them get there. We really want to, and the research suggests that we really do want to try to keep them working with us for at least 3 months once we get the kids back at home. 6 months would be great. 3 months is kind of that, and it may help to put that out there, set that expectation that we're going to work really hard to get your kids back to you. But I just want you to know that we're not going to be looking at closing this case until those kids have been with you for at least 3 months. Right, but they know that the kids aren't going to be removed, right, and that they could just transfer to traditional DN and they're going to get the dismissal. They're smart enough to know that.
I guess in ours, the statement is, just so you know, I will have to make a report back to CFS if you discharge unsuccessfully without continuing family treatment court. And I guess I don't know, if there's been enough studies done on if someone okay, so here's what I heard. When we make treatment court shorter than 1 year, the success outcomes are worse. And so we've kind of been trying to stick with at least that minimum of a year.
It's dosage. It's that question of dosage. And we do see that engagement in treatment, and treatment is a whole bunch of stuff, engagement of at least 9 months seems to make a difference. And what treatment courts do is keep you engaged in treatment for at least 9 months. So that's, but you know, we want to be working with them, and we want to be stepping them down, and we want to be really focused on those things of recovery capital, because recovery capital is the thing that keeps us in recovery. So we're managing those really acute health needs, but you know, part of what we're doing and part of what we're, you know, keeping them there long enough to like rebuild those relationships, build in that recovery capital, because that's the thing that's going to keep you in recovery after we're out. And that's, you know, that's part of that dosage, yeah.
Right, so we just, you know, and it usually takes, it's pretty impossible, actually, I've never seen someone get their trial home visit completed and have a sponsor and have a sober support network and have stable housing and have all of that right at the moment their trial home visit ends. So, I mean, our department has extended and made it really easy for parents to opt into extending their case because they're getting assistance with childcare and they're getting all these services and they're getting all these supports.
Right. We're kind of at our time, but I also want us to just have a conversation. Maybe we can talk a little bit about like AA, NA, and sponsors and some of that. Let's talk about that a little bit tomorrow, because I think that's also, sometimes that's the thing that's tripping people up. And a sponsor is not magic, and NA and AA is not for everybody. And so it's that recovery capital that we need you to demonstrate you've got. And you know, a sponsor and going to meetings is an easy way to show one piece of it. But let's talk about that a little bit tomorrow. With that.